All right, so welcome everyone. My name is Liz Anderson. I am the project manager for the Florida Instructional Materials Center for the Visually Impaired. And this webinar that you are joining us for this morning is FIMC-VI Info and Updates, part 2 of 3. So this is a 3-part series. We've already had part 1. Part 3 will be later on April 11th, that will address end of year procedures, including ordering textbooks and returning item to FIMC-VI. So if that is new to you or if you would like a refresher, don't forget to register for that webinar as well. So our agenda for today, so our welcome, and then the primary focus of this webinar is on annual census. I realize now that's not showing that right there, but so 910 overview of that should say annual census student system. And then we're going to do some updates from FIMC upcoming events, and we'll do our evaluation and in-service credit around 10:25-ish, and we will adjourn by 10:30. Okay, so as I said, the primary focus of this webinar is annual census. So you will be learning what is the annual census, why is the annual census conducted, when is the annual census conducted, and how do you complete the annual census. So hopefully by the end of this webinar, you will be ready to go. And Kelly, I see that you said you can't access the link for the handouts. Tiffany, I think you're on here. If you
Yeah, I'll get a new one for everyone.
Okay, thank you. Um, and so let's see, I do want to ask a question, but I'm going to tell you about our in-service credit before we move on. So just like most of our trainings, we do offer in-service and or ACVREP credit. If you are interested, you're going to want to take note of the opening code, which is all. I'll type that in the chat. And at the end of the session, I will give you the closing code and let you know how to get that certificate to try to get credit for attending this webinar. All right, so I have a question for you all. So you're going to respond by typing in the chat. And so the question that I have is, how do you feel about completing the annual census, or how prepared do you feel for completing the annual census? One is I'm ready to go. You could just start it right now. Two is I could use some more help. Or three, I'm starting at 0. So maybe it's brand new to you, or you've only done this once before, or it's been a while and you need a refresher. So one, I'm ready to go. Two, I could use some help. Or three, I am starting at 0. All right. So we have a lot that are ready to go. So this will be a good refresher for you and information to bring back to your districts, to your colleagues, and some that are looking for some help and some that are brand new. All right. So thank you all for joining so we can get this information out there. All right. So for those of you who don't know, FIMC-VI, we are a statewide resource center for K-12 students who are visually impaired and enrolled in a public school, private school, charter school, or students being homeschooled. We are located in the Hillsborough County Public School District. We are an Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or IDEA, funded state project maintained by the Florida Department of Education Bureau of Exceptional Education and Student Services. Our vision is that we are striving for access and success at the highest levels for all students with visual impairments. And our mission is to promote the success of Florida students with visual impairments by providing free, high quality, accessible instructional materials in a timely manner, and providing teachers, administrators, families, agency personnel, and others with resources and opportunities for training and professional learning, much like we are doing here today. Okay, so let's start with a very high level definition of what is the annual census. So annual census is an annual or every year registration of eligible students that determines a per capita amount of money designated for the purchase of educational materials produced by the American Printing House for the Blind, or APH. These funds are credited to federal quota accounts, which are maintained and administered by APH and its ex officio trustees throughout the country. So if you have ordered APH products from us before, then the annual census is what allowed us to have the funds to provide those APH products to you for free. And we're going to go into more details about what some of these things mean on the slide in the coming slides. Okay, so the American Printing House for the Blind, you may not be aware, but it is one of the, I think, oldest institutions in the United States. It was created by the federal government. So back in 1879, the Congress of the United States passed the act to promote the education of the blind. And this act designates APH as the official supplier of educational materials to all students in the US who meet the definition of blindness and are working at less than college level. And so myself, as FIMC-VI's project manager, I am an ex officio trustee of APH on behalf of the Florida Department of Education. And I help with managing our federal quota funds for the state of Florida. There are, I will say though, so FIMC, we are coordinating with DOE for those students, but then there are several other organizations in Florida that receive quota funds as well and have their own ex officio trustee. So that includes the Florida School for the Deaf and the Blind, the Miami Lighthouse, and the Conklin Center. So a student can only be registered with one organization that receives federal quota funds for APH. So if a student is being served by one of those organizations that I just mentioned, if that's their primary educational placement, then they should be registered with those organizations and the funds would go to that place and the APH products for those students would be ordered through those institutions. All right, so why do we conduct an annual census each year? And it should be kind of coming together, or you may already know the answer to this, but this allows Florida to participate in that federal act to promote the education of the blind. And then because we count all of these students and report them to APH, and Congress has that federal appropriation every year. There's a line item in the budget specifically for this. FIMC is allocated quota funds based on the number of eligible students registered with us. Okay, so, and I'm going to get more into who is eligible. That has changed. It actually changed this past year at the beginning of 2024. So that's a little bit different if you've been doing this for a while and maybe you weren't involved in annual census in January 2024. They did broaden who is eligible for APH. So these quota funds are used for ordering accessible materials from APH. So like I said, so we do now receive, so in the past, there were only certain students that we received funds for when they were registered with us. Now APH has broadened that. So just about everyone who is registered with us is going to generate funds. So that's why we ask that all students be registered regardless of their acuities or their peripheral fields. All right, so the federal quota funds that are generated, FIMC receives approximately $450 per student who meets the criteria. Because that amount of let me back up. So because APH changed their eligibility to expand it to more students, which we'll see what that expansion was and who's involved in that, included in that. Our amount, which this year was $450, it is going to go down a little bit. And so because what happens is that, like I said, there's that federal appropriation, there's this big pot of money, let's say it's $20 million for the entire country that Congress gives to APH for federal quota. And then they divide that by the number of students that were registered by all of the ex officio trustees and reported to APH to determine what the per student allocation will be. And then they multiply that per student allocation by the number of students that EOT registered. So if it was 20 million and let's say it was like $300 per student, and then we registered 3,000 students. I'm not very good at math. I think that's like $900,000 maybe. um, but so it's the total number of students that are registered plus that appropriation from Congress that really determines how much each student, what that per student allocation will be. So it changes from year to year. And with the change that APH had, that has reduced the amount a little bit. APH is hoping that Congress will now allocate more funding to APH because more students are being counted. Okay. So hopefully that all makes sense. And so with all of this, no APH funding is provided for students who do not meet the eligibility criteria, which at this point is really just going to be students if somehow the parent consent form was lost and when you get to annual census, you can't find it, which hopefully that's not happening and you're keeping that in a secure place where it can be passed on from provider to provider, whoever's working with that student, so it's not lost. Um, and just so you know, that the quota funds that we receive for APH are a small percentage of the amount of the actual equipment and textbooks that we provide. So here in Florida, we are fortunate because while we have APH funding, we also receive funding from the Florida Department of Education, and not all states have that. So we use that funding to provide textbooks and other things that not necessarily every state has that option. So other reasons for the annual census. So I kind of hinted at this on the previous slide, but if a student is not registered with FIMC, then the district is responsible for providing and purchasing APH materials to provide access to the general curriculum. So only students who are registered with us are eligible for those APH products. Um, but if those students are registered with us, then you can request those items from us at no cost to the district. So there's really nothing to lose once you register the students with us. I do know that sometimes some parents are hesitant to provide that consent to register students with us, and we're going to get into that parent consent in a little bit. If that does happen where a parent is kind of questioning it and they're not sure why that consent is being asked for, and you're looking for a little more justification or how you can help explain it to the parent, please just reach out to us. I have spoken with a handful of parents in the past to help explain APH and the census and how that all works and the privacy of the student data, et cetera. So feel free to reach out to us if you're having issues with that. So for the criteria of eligibility and receiving federal quota funds, this is the category that was changed for the 2024 annual census. In the past, it was just one of these first two things that you see here on this slide. A student had to either meet the definition of legal blindness, which is 2200 or less in the better eye with best correction, or a peripheral field of vision no greater than 20 degrees, so legal blindness, or function at the definition of blindness, which is visual performance reduced by brain injury or dysfunction when visual function, or dysfunction when visual function meets the definition of blindness as determined by an eye care specialist or neurologist, which is essentially your students with neurological visual impairment. And then this past year, this last category was added. So the new category is meet the definition of visual impairment in IDEA. So this is an impairment in vision that even with correction adversely affects a child's educational performance. So now this is why we essentially are saying that every single student that has been identified as having a visual impairment in Florida, they are eligible for APH as long as you have that parent consent. And there are some other criteria as well. But as far as the visual impairment side of things, they're all going to be captured there. So the remaining criteria for federal quota funds is that the student must be enrolled in a public or private nonprofit educational program of less than college level. Students in homeschool programs can participate, but they should meet the Florida guidelines and or procedures for homeschool education. Each student must have a written educational plan. They must be enrolled with the registering school or agency on the first Monday in January. And like I said, only one school or agency can register a child. You must have eye medical exam information, and you must have the signed consent to share student information with APH. Okay, so now that we've covered the eligibility, let's go over the process for completing annual census. So to start, who completes the annual census? These are the staff members that are typically involved in the annual census. So we have our exceptional student education directors, we have our vision contacts, and our teachers of students with visual impairments. ESE directors should be aware of who their TVIs are. Hopefully, the vision contacts in districts may need to assist the ESE director with that and have that information so they can determine who they want to designate for completing the annual census. All right. So before we move on, yeah, Stephanie, I see your question. And Tiffany's correct, and I do have a slide addressing that in a little bit too. So before we move on, I have another question for you to type your answer in the chat. So the question is, how often do you need to have the parental consent form signed to register students with FIMC? And this is an open-ended question. So type whatever you think the answer is, or how often do you need to have the parental consent form signed to register students with FIMC? All right, I have a few answers here saying once as long as it is on file when entering the program. So we definitely have folks on here who are very familiar with this process. So you all are correct. So let's go into the details on this. So yes, you only need to sign once as long as the student remained in your district. That does mean that if the student was in your district and then they moved to a neighboring district, or let's say they transfer to FSDB or they move out of the state, if they go somewhere else and then they come back, you have to have that consent form signed again. So that's an important thing to remember. You have the option within your district of adding FIMC and APH to your existing consent forms if the district already has things for collecting student identifiable information, or you can use the one that we have provided. So we do have our consent form that we've created available in multiple languages on our form page on our website. So you cannot register students with us until that form is signed. You don't need to send that consent form to us. That's something that you keep on file in your district. And maybe even you're scanning it and uploading it into a central repository for all of your students. So that way you know that you're always going to have that consent form handy. And that is an auditable document, which is why we make such a big deal about that. Okay, so step one for the annual census is that the ESE director administrators must update the FIMC-VI authorized users by January 1. So this is where those ESE directors are allowing access for FIMC-VI's authorized users, who are typically your vision contacts and TVIs, to be able to go into our system and update the student records for annual census. So their responsibilities for us with it and how this process is going to work is that an email is going to be sent to the ESE directors that we have on file here at FIMC with their user ID and password. And that email is going to be sent out within the next few weeks. My goal is to have it go out before we go on fall break. So if you are here and you're a vision contact, then please try to speak with your ESE director sometime within the next few weeks and ask them to keep an eye out for this email. Because if your ESE director is new or they haven't been through this process very many times, they're very likely going to not know what that email is about. They're going to think it's spam, or they aren't going to know what to do with it. So we really want to try to help them out and make sure that they know what they need to do and give them some heads up if possible. So I will be sending an email to our vision contacts and within our vision contacts team with what information will be shared with your ESE directors, so you know what they're going to be seeing, so then you can help facilitate that process as well. So they're going to receive that information, and once they understand what to do, they're going to log into our online system, which is the same place where you register students and order textbooks. And they're going to go through the menus and see a list of district personnel that were previously authorized to register students under the annual census menu. So they're going to see a list. And I'm going to show you what these screenshots look like in a little bit here. So who should manage the annual census? For public schools, like I said, the district ESE administrators are automatically authorized to register students. So that's the person we have on file. Now, that's not to say that that person has maybe changed in your district, and we haven't found that out yet. If you know that you have a new ESE director this year, it would be very helpful if you could reach out to me or Tiffany and let us know that so that we can have that information updated in our system, because we don't always have a good way of finding that information out. So ESE administrators have the authority to designate other personnel, such as our vision contacts and teachers of students with visual impairments, as the FIMC-VI authorized users to go in and register and update students. And it is the responsibility of that individual each year to log on to our system and update that list of authorized users. So if you are on here and you are with a charter LEA, a private school, or an agency, the administrator of that school or agency is the one who is authorized as the director. Homeschool parents are also authorized to register students. So this process is our way of ensuring that only the people who are authorized have access to student identifiable information. What if an authorized user is missing from this list, or the director, or if you are the contact helping the director, don't recognize someone on the list? So it is important to verify the status of the people that are on the list before they're authorized to update student registration to help make sure that student identifiable information isn't shared with someone that shouldn't have it. So there may be staff from charter schools or other departments that are serving students with visual impairments that are on the list, or students being served with a 504 plan. So that's why it's a good idea for that director to work with a vision contact and others to verify who those individuals are. If there's someone missing, then the ESE director or their designee can complete the staff authorization or removal form that's on the form page of our website. Or it's a good idea to just go ahead and remove people that are no longer in your district using that same form. So they're not showing up in there year after year when they have no need to be in our form. And that way we can remove their ability to log into the system in the first place. So like I said, it is recommended that the vision contact or TVI work with the ESE administrator in updating that list of users and approving the district personnel. All right. And in case you're not familiar with the staff authorization or removal form, once that form is filled out, if you're adding a staff member, the staff member will receive an email with their login information to the online system. Okay. So if that ESE director is wanting to have others help them with the list of designees and identifying who those people are, they do have the option of creating a printer-friendly list of those individuals and printing it as a PDF and sharing with whoever they need to share it with. So there's just some directions here on the slide for that. They could even just take a screenshot of that page, whatever works for that individual, but that's probably the best way of getting the information to somebody else to verify. So here, let's look at the actual process that's on the website, and we have our screenshots built in here. So for going to the online system, if you go to our website and you go to the online system link in the top menu of our website, or there is the web address, which is ollo.sdhc.k12.fl.us. If you go there and you log in, which is what that first screenshot at the top here looks like, and you check that you are not a robot, don't forget to do that, otherwise it won't let you in. You're going to sign in. This is what the ESE director will see. They'll sign in and they'll see at the top the annual census menu. So during pre-census mode, which is until January 1st, this page, this annual census, will only be displayed for ESE administrators. Then once we switch into census mode, so that will be turned on after January 1st. Then, and going through the annual census, which will end on February 1st, That menu will be available for ESE directors and whoever they authorize to access student records. So if you as a TDI log in before January 2nd, you are not going to see the annual census menu. It's not going to show up until after January 1st. Once the ESE director selects that annual census menu, they're going to go to this page, and here you can see that there is a select designees button. And below that, you'll see the view students button. So we're going to come back to that later, but for now, we're going to focus on the select designees because once the ESE director clicks on that, they're going to have another menu show up where if for some reason they are somehow tied to multiple districts, they might be able to select a different one, but you do have to select the district. And once you do that, the ESE director will see the list of people that we have in our system tied to their district and their status, whether or not they have access. So we'll say no access or allow access. So the ESE director needs to go through each person and decide, am I changing that status? Is this someone who should not have access anymore, or now they do need to have access? You'll see at the top right here, the printer friendly list link. That is the link that I was talking about, where if you want to create a PDF of this list, that's a good way to do that. And then the click here link that you see underlined below that should take you to the staff authorization and removal form. So if you're going through and you see, okay, this person is not in our district anymore, let's go ahead and remove them so they can't sign into the system anymore because there's no need for them to be doing that if they're not with your organization anymore. All right, I'm going to check and see. I don't see any questions. So we're going to keep rolling with this. So once the ESE director has gone through this whole list and they know that it's correct as to who is going to have access and they've added anyone who needs access, they're going to click submit down at the bottom. Okay, so this ESE director, if before January 1st they realize that they made a mistake, they can always go back in and fix something and submit it again, but they do just need to submit in order to save the changes that they have made when they're on that page. But whoever says allow access, those are the individuals who are going to have that access to complete annual census, to go in and update student registration. Step 2 of the annual census, all student records must be updated by February 1st. That is the first Saturday in February, in case you were someone who is working on the weekends. So before we continue on, I have a question. Which students are included in the annual census? And you see here on the slide your choices. You can type the number in the chat. 1 is only students who are legally blind. 2, only students who have a primary disability of visual impairment. Or 3, all students who have been identified as having a visual impairment. So which answer do you think is correct? Okay, I see a lot of very fast and confident responses here. It looks like everyone is in consensus that 3 is the answer and you are all correct. So that tells me that you have understood everything I have shared so far. So that is wonderful news. All right, let's move on. So all of those individuals who have that status allow access and are now authorized users, their responsibility at this point, as of the first Monday in January, which is January 6th, is to go in and update the student records. So that view students button that you saw on that previous slide will be activated. So everyone in the district who is serving students is going to go in and begin to update current student records and enter any new records for the annual census. So if there are students that for whatever reason weren't registered with us yet, by the time we get to annual census, you still have the ability to go in and register them. Do remember though that you can register students with us anytime. You could register students with us right now if you wanted to. It's just during the annual census process, you're adding them, and then we do kind of lock things down a little bit to help us make sure that we're not adding duplicate student records into the system. So the FIMC-VI authorized users are going to click on Update to open the record of each student for which they are responsible. This next slide will show you that View Students button again. And I do want to just point out here, I think it's a little misleading what it shows on this page. So this is after you've clicked on the annual census menu, and then it takes you here and you see the View Students. It says their parental consent upload link. That does not mean that you are uploading anything to us. That is just a link to the parental consent forms that we have available. So just remember, you don't need to send anything to us as far as parental consent goes, but that should take you to the page that has all of the consent forms we have available. This is what the page looks like after you click on that View Student button. So you'll see at the top is the district, and then all of the students are in the list, and you have update on the left, the student name, their birth date, and their status. So if you work in more than one district, then you are going to be selecting the district that you want to work in at the top and changing it and going through each district or agency that you serve that you have been authorized to update students for. And if you have a student that is missing from the list that you need to add, then you can click on that Add New VI Student that's at the very top of the table there. You'll see that it's in all caps in blue, and that's where you'll just fill out a brand new student registration form to add that student. So this slide is the items to update that FIMC-VI authorized users are going to look at. And this is essentially all of the same information that you provide during student registration, because that information we collect is really for APH and the annual census. So if you attended the part 1 of info and updates, a lot of this information will be the same. It won't be new to you, but it's a good reminder to go over this again. So student status, this is one of the different things when we're doing annual census. So this is where you can update the student if they're no longer in your district. You can pick what their status is, why they moved away from your district, and then you don't have to do anything else for that student. Our student information, so that includes the district or school, the type of educational facility, the student's first name, last name, middle name, and their date of birth. We have our reading media, grade level, type of written plan, the primary instructional language of the learner. There is still a section on our website that says confirm the district has an eye medical exam. There's an asterisk here because I'm going to go into some more detail on that in a few slides. Confirm the presence of a progressive eye disease, dual sensory impairment, updated eye medical acuities, and any restricted visual fields if that information is available. Once you click on that update next to a student, this is what's going to pop up. So you can see at the very top here is that student status section. So if you click on, and it's hiding behind this drop down, there's a button that says change status. If the student is no longer in your district, select change status and select the option that is most appropriate for the student as to why they're no longer in your district, and submit that, and then you can move on to the next student. You won't have to do anything else. If you do have to update the student, they're still in your district, you'll see just like when you're registering a student, it's all the same information, and you have your red asterisk over to the far left as to the fields that are required, which is just about everything. There are a handful of things that are not required, and we'll go into detail on each of these. The first one is district and type of educational facility. The district should already be loaded based on your profile, which district you chose and the student, it should all be tied together. And then for the type of educational facility, if you're in a public or charter school, you're going to select public school. If it's private and homeschool, you're going to select private school. And the reason for this is we have two different accounts with the Florida Department of Education and APH. There is a public school account and then a private school account. For primary reading medium, there are some different categories here. And so this information is required by APH, and it's helpful for them to project the materials that they're producing and the formats that will be needed. And for textbooks, they do produce a lot of textbooks for students across the country. And so for this one, you're considering what is the medium that the student primarily uses in their studies. So your choices are auditory, braille, pre-reader, visual reader, or symbolic reader. All students that are in infant and preschool programs must be reported as pre-readers. In the past, we had non-reader as an option that was changed to symbolic reader. I put the definition of symbolic reader here to help you determine if that is applicable for your student. That is one that accesses printed materials with tangible 2 or 3-dimensional symbols. Examples of these symbols are photographs, line pictures, real objects, miniature objects, partial objects, etc. These symbols may or may not have braille or print attached, but the student needs the additional symbol to access the learning material. So that definition was provided by APH. That is the primary reading medium. So you're going to pick one of those options provided. For secondary and other reading mediums, you do not need to select anything. You can select NA if there is no secondary or other reading medium. But your choices at this point are auditory, braille, or visual, and these cannot duplicate the previous reading medium that you selected. So if you selected braille for primary, you cannot select braille for secondary or other. But just remember, you can select NA if needed. Next is grade level. These categories are provided by APH. There are some nuances here, so just be sure to take note of this and make sure you're reporting students correctly. IP is for infants and children served by infant programs, so this is birth to age 3. PS is children of preschool age served by preschool programs. Kindergarten is kindergarten. Grade 1 through 12. So you're going to pick the grade. So grade 12 is a little, you have some choices there perhaps if the student is in grade 12, whether they're 12 or an adult. So grade 12 is for all students who are in grade 12 or are continuing to receive special education services under IDEA until the student turns age 22. So there were some previous categories that have been removed that were separate from grade 12, but those students are all falling under grade 12. The caveat is that if this is a student in grade 12 and they're age 22 and above by the first Monday in January, which will be January 6th, they must be reported as adults, even if they're in grade 12. So those students who have been continuing in high school, if they're age 22 as of January 6th, you must report them as adults. There is a box that you check for the adult students. You're just going to check that. That's kind of a holdover, I think, from APH, but we're just doing that to help confirm to them that this is an adult student. This is a screenshot of that dropdown. So very simply, you're just going to select whichever grade level is appropriate for the student. For type of written plan, we do have a lot of different options here. So like I said, for the eligibility, there does need to be some type of written plan in place, and this should cover all of the students who are registered with us. So select whichever one is appropriate for the student. For primary language, as I mentioned, this is the language that is based on the language that textbooks are provided in. So this is another one of those where APH is looking for this information to help them project the need for textbooks in other languages in future years when they are producing textbooks for students across the country. So your choices here are English, Spanish, other, or NA. So let's go back to the iMedical information there. So we do still have on our form a checkbox about having the current iMedical report. That is no longer a required field. It has not been required for several years now, I think since maybe 2020. You do have to have some kind of iMedical information though. So here we are just reminding you to ensure that all students, whether they are visually impaired or dual sensory impaired, whether that's primary, secondary, or anywhere in there that they've been identified as having a visual impairment or a dual sensory impairment, that they are registered with us, regardless of whether there is a current iMedical report. So it doesn't matter how old your iMedical information is. So you don't need to check that box on our form about that current medical report being available. But there should be some kind of medical documentation on file somewhere that was used to determine services and or eligibility. So you're just looking through, maybe that's in your in the IEP, maybe it's in an assessment report somewhere where that information was documented if you can't find the actual report from a medical doctor. This, of course, the fact that we don't care about how old the medical report is and our requirements here, this isn't related to any of the requirements for medical reports related to eligibility, reevaluation, or dismissal for visual impairment. So these are two completely separate situations, scenarios, boxes of information. So everything that for registering students with us in APH, you're just looking for whatever medical report information you have, and that is separate from whatever you're doing as far as medical reports related to students with visual impairments and that eligibility rule. Under the iMedical information section, there is some information that's asked for, and this is to help us determine, is this student meeting the definition of blindness? Are they functioning at the definition of blindness? Or if they're neither one of those, is this a student that meets the definition of visual impairment in IDEA, which is that third new category? So we're still looking for this information to help us determine that. So you're going to give us the distance visual acuities that you have using after best correction if available. And you're going to use codes as needed. So things like count fingers, functions as a definition of blindness, hand movement, object perception, light perception, or no light perception. You do have a note to FIMC staff where you can enter additional information that if you would like to share that with us. There are some check boxes on here. So we have the box for the current iMedical report. So remember, you don't need to check that. Don't worry about that box. We'll pretend that it doesn't even exist. There's the question about progressive eye disease. You can check that box if that is present. Is the student dual sensory impaired? So this is a reminder that if your student is dual sensory impaired, that those students need to be registered with the Florida Virgin Islands Deaf Blind Collaborative as well. There is a census for students who are dual sensory impaired and deafblind, so we want to make sure they're participating in that too, and not just our annual census. Under peripheral field, you have the visual field numbers as your only option. So if the medical report does not have, or any of your documentation does not show any of these numbers, just leave this blank. Don't put anything in here. But if you do have that information for a student, do provide it here, because this really helps us identify those students that are legally blind based on their visual fields and not their acuities. So they can be counted in that category of students to APH. At the bottom of the student registration page, we have the section where you're confirming that you have parent consent and you're agreeing that all of the information that was provided is accurate. So you should not be submitting this if you don't have that parent consent form on file and certifying that you agree with the statement that is on that page. So a few questions that might come up. What if a student is not showing up on the list? So as I mentioned previously, you can register students by clicking on the Add New VI Student link that's at the top of that table where the students are listed and completing that online form. When that new student registration has been approved at FIMC, a student number is going to be displayed in the completed table, and an email will be sent to the authorized user or whoever it is that registered the student with that student ID number. And then you can click on the view link to obtain the ID number for approved new students. So this next slide will show you what that view link looks like. So this table here, this is what's at the bottom of the view students. When you're doing your updating your students, you'll see up at the top, there's still some students that haven't been updated yet. And then we have our completed student list. And under there, we have a new student registration. So any new students would fall into that section. And there would be a view button there or link if there was a new student where you could click on that to see more information and that student ID. The students that have been updated are going to be at the very bottom under end of year student edits. And you'll notice that those students are locked. So a student is going to be locked once they're updated until we close the annual census. And I kind of hinted at this earlier, but we do this in order to manage duplicated students because our state is very transient. So we have a lot of students that are moving around. So we don't want a student to be counted in two districts. So let's say they were removed from one and added in the other, and just kind of managing all of those changes and just keeping everything sort of static for a little bit to help us make sure all of the information is accurate. Step 3 of annual census. So by February 1st, that is when annual census will close. The ESE directors can return to the annual census menu and go in and monitor the progress of their district updates. If you have any questions as you're going through the census, you can contact Kathy Cagle. She is the one who processes the student updates and sending the information to APH. You can also reach out to me or Tiffany. We are both very familiar with this process as well for any assistance that you might need. But once you have updated all of the records of the students for whom you are responsible, it's best practice to notify your supervisor or the ESE director so they can kind of keep track of the progress within their district and make sure that everyone's going in and updating their students. And once all of this is done and we've made sure that all of the students are correct, nothing's been duplicated, we make sure the information is set up how APH needs it, and we send the information to APH. I will say that APH, while they get all of the information that you give to us, the information they report to the federal government does not include any student identifiable information. They only are giving the counts, the numbers of students that were in each of those categories. And that information, it goes to APH, and there's only, I think, 2 people at APH that have access to that information. And the information is only housed there for a year, and then it's removed from the system. So they take the security of our student data very seriously. Because they are, they have to follow all the rules of FERPA and HIPAA and all that good stuff, which is why we have to get that consent form signed as well to share that information with APH. But I think that's kind of good information to know sometimes, especially if you do have a parent who's concerned about their child's data. Other frequently asked questions. So can the ESE director designate new authorized users after January 1st? So yes, they can go in and do that, but until they do that, there may not be any individuals authorized to complete the annual census, and they may end up being the only ones responsible for doing that or even being able to update the annual census. So it's really in their best interest to go in or have somebody help them with this of updating the authorized users so people can actually go in and update student records. What happens if we don't complete the student updates by February 1st? So if a student is not updated, then we cannot report them to APH. And that's primarily because we need to confirm that that student was enrolled in your district as of the first Monday of January, and that all of that other information is accurate. Because if we don't have all of that information, we don't know if it's correct, and we can't report that to APH, and the student can't be counted, and they're not going to generate federal funds. We do try to keep an eye on what's going on within districts and follow up with districts if it seems like students are not being updated. But if you are the vision contacts, everyone can see all of the students in your district. So you can see what's going on with the students too and follow up with teachers. If you know the students that are on a given teacher's caseload are not being updated, you can follow up with them as well. What happens if the student's iMedical exam is more than 3 years old? So I hope that at this point we all agree that it doesn't matter. Nothing happens because we don't care how old the information is. APH doesn't care about it, so we don't care about it. Those students can be registered with FIMC, even if you have data that's 5 years old. As far as APH is concerned, that's good enough for them. So that's all we're worrying about. Okay, let me check on our time here. So we are doing really well on our time. It looks like we're going to finish early today. But before we wrap up, I did want to go over some updates from FIMC just to make sure you all are aware of other things that we have going on and coming up here. And Tiffany, I think you're still here if you want to share any information about these things as well, but I can give the high level overview. So we did launch, so as you all know, I think we have a variety of Canvas courses or courses on our Canvas site and resource pages within that. We launched a new Canvas course just within the past few weeks for JAWS. So this is an introduction to JAWS, very basic if you're brand new to JAWS screen reading software and you want to kind of learn all of those commands and get used to the whole concept of screen reading software. This is a wonderful course that Andrea Wallace designed for us, and she's going to keep adding content to this course. So you can sign up for this JAWS course on the Canvas sign up form that we have for all of our Canvas courses and resource pages. The link is on the slide as well. We have Florida Regional Braille Challenge coming up. And actually, even before that, it's not on this slide, but Florida Cane Quest is this weekend. So if you are in the Tampa area and you haven't, I don't even know if registration is still open, but
It's not open.
it's not
But
open.
we hope you're registered and that we'll see you there.
Yes. Yeah, because that is taking place this Saturday in Tampa. So we're very excited about that. And then our next student and family event will be the Florida Regional Braille Challenge event. So we are hosting for this year as usual. The first one will be in Tampa. I will say a lot of these are at different locations or days of the week than they were in the past. Um, if you're not familiar with Braille Challenge, that is a national Braille competition for first to 12th grade students. We have pre-Braille activities for children who are 3 to 5 years old and those learning Braille. For the rest of the students, the event is a competition in Braille reading and speed and accuracy, reading comprehension, spelling, interpreting charts and graphs. There are always activities in the morning that are tied to the theme of the event. There's a Braille book swap, a drum circle, and prizes. We're always looking for help at these events. So if you haven't registered yet, please do sign up to help as a scorekeeper, a proctor, or a guide. If you have students that are going, do know that you don't have to be at the event for your students to participate, but there does need to be an adult with the student, a family member or some other teacher who will be with that student. So the West Braille Challenge event will be, like I said, in Tampa on January 24th. That will be at our new location. It's a middle school that's in South Tampa. The East event will be in Orlando on February 7th. That is also at a new location. The new Lively, no, not Lively, the new Orange Technical
Yeah.
College campus.
Orange.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Then our North Florida, that I totally got that backwards. Look at that. North in Miami and South in Dallas, and that doesn't make
Oh, the
any sense.
orange. Yeah.
So I would need somebody to confirm for me which of these, but I will say that the Miami event is at the Miami Lighthouse on a Saturday, so not on a
It's March
Friday.
8th.
Okay, so the
Yeah.
cities are wrong, but the dates are, the beginning is
Yeah.
correct. Okay,
The
thank you.
dates are correct. Uh-huh.
Okay,
Yeah.
so in Miami on a Saturday, the event in North Florida and Tallahassee will be at Lively Technical College like it was last year.
So February 21st is the North one in Tallahassee. And
Mm-hmm.
March 8th on Saturday is the South Rail Challenge in Miami. And
Mm-hmm.
I would only add about, you talked about the workshop, Liz, the parent workshop.
I haven't said that yet. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
so
go ahead.
go ahead. Yeah, at each of these events, there's a parent workshop. And I think just historically, we've only had parents really of students who are attending the events, but we really want parents, like all parents. So please, share out that any parent of any child who is receiving services for vision impairment is welcome to join in these parent workshops. This one is going to be on adjustment to vision impairment and blindness. We'll have some really amazing guest speakers share their experiences and what helped them in those adjustment periods, through loss of vision, changes in their life. And so it's really going to be a great series, and 4 different offerings. So we're hoping to capture more parents than just those who have students who are attending the event. There is not childcare though, so they would have to make sure that they have someone to watch the students or that they can sit with in the event themselves.
And lunch is provided though, right?
Hmm.
They're part of lunch because the parent workshop starts before lunch, then you have lunch, and it continues after lunch.
That's
So
right.
yes, we are hoping that more parents will come to those workshops beyond just the ones who have children participating in the events.
Hmm.
Then our next event, the big event coming up after that, is our working with the experts in December 12th to the 13th in Winter Garden. Well, it's actually at the same location as our, let's see, our Orlando Braille Challenge event at the Orange Technical College. And that workshop or working with the experts is going to be all about assistive technology. So screen reading software and Braille displays. So if you want to learn more about that technology, that is the place that you want to be. There's going to be multiple sessions, multiple presenters over the 2 days. And I think really for all, ability levels, higher level content and lower level content. So that
Yeah.
is still open. We still have space. So please do register for that. Did you want to add anything to that one, Tiffany?
No, I think I'm excited about that. We have some, if you think you've seen all the different Braille, note takers and Braille displays there are, you're mistaken. There's some really neat stuff that we're going to have there. I'm excited for those vendors to come and show all the neat things that those devices can do, and then for us to really get together, as a group and as a field to learn how to use those and how to instruct students, on those devices. I think it'll be a very rich learning experience for all of us. And again, like Liz said, for all levels and of experience with technology and all levels of fear and comfort. Everyone's welcome. It should be great.
Mm-hmm. And then after that, the next big event will be our working with the expert on April 2nd to the 3rd in Tampa. That will be at our new location here in South Tampa. And that one will be focused on Braille and orientation mobility. So providing instruction in those areas, assessing students in those areas, and again, across all levels. So early childhood, using assistive technology with those things, a lot of different sessions and presenters as well. So that one is going to be a wonderful learning opportunity for what any students that you have that are learning those skills. Um,
I would only add, we've had a lot of really good trainings this year in the first quarter, first semester. So if there's something that happened, just make sure you check out that past events webpage and see the recording in your time. I know sometimes it's hard to get to us when we're actually live, but check out those recordings, see if there's anything there that would be beneficial for you.
mhm. Yeah, and we do have other webinars coming up in the spring. We have another one on statewide assessment, and then, of course, our next info and updates. And we do plan to add a few related to teaching Braille.
Mhm.
Um, those will be webinars in the spring. We just need to solidify the dates for those, but those will be with Frances Mary DeAndrea. If you know who she is, you know those will be some wonderful presentations. So keep an eye out for that.
Yeah.
All right, so that brings us to the end of our presentation, our webinar today. We do have our evaluation here. I hope that you can fill out that form. We do greatly appreciate your feedback and incorporate it into our planning for future trainings. And that QR code takes you to the form, but it's the same form we use for all of our trainings. And it's also on the form page of our website. Tiffany just dropped it in the chat as well. If you are looking for in-service and or ACVREP credits, your closing code that you want to take note of is students. I just put that in the chat for you. So you're going to fill out the form that's on the right. Tiffany just put that link in the chat as well. And when you fill it out, you're going to receive a certificate via email, which you have to provide to your district or to the state to have that approved by them in order to receive credit. And if you don't receive that certificate within a day or two, something has gone wrong on the back end. So go ahead and reach out to us and we'll make sure that you get that certificate. I'm going to leave this slide here for a moment before I move on to our last one. The opening code, Katie, was all. And hopefully the opening and closing code make sense together. All right. So On our last slide here, I have our contact information. So my email is eanderson@fimcvi.org. If you have questions about anything that I shared today, please do not hesitate to reach out to me. I'm more than willing to help or answer any questions that you have. Or if any of your colleagues that weren't able to be here, if you could share this information with them, they can reach out to me as well. We moved over the summer, so our new address is 4716 West Montgomery Avenue. We're still in Tampa. If you have anything to return to us, please use that address. We have our same phone and fax number, fortunately. We switched to a new mailing platform over the summer as well. So if you are not receiving email communication from us, whether it's our quarterly newsletter or we're constantly sending out updates because we're always trying to make sure everyone has resources and access to information that's relevant to you. So if you're not receiving those, go ahead and fill out the sign up form for that mailing list. It's the very last form on the form page of our website, and you fill it out and we'll add you to the list, and then you should start receiving updates from us. And there's our website, and we have a YouTube page, and that is it. I'm going to go ahead and stop my recording.